Adam Bessie and Dan Carino are here to talk about the movement by billionaires like Bill and Melinda Gates to change the education system through privatization and a more rigid and technocratic curriculum. Adam is a professor of English at a community college in Northern California. Hello, Adam. Welcome to Truthout Interviews.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate having me on today.
And Dan is a graphic journalist based in Los Angeles. Hello to you, Dan.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Now, together they created the graphic comic on Truthout to highlight this reform movement, and it's entitled The Gates Foundation Education Reform Hype Machine and Bizarre Inequality Theory. Now, Adam, I'm going to start with you. When I hear the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on maybe my local NPR affiliate or PBS TV station, it has this appearance that they're these do-gooders that are committed to public education, but they're not really committed to public education in the way that I'm thinking about it. They're more committed to changing public education. And maybe you could speak to that.
Well, I can't speak to their motives. I mean, I think they may well think that they're doing good. I have no idea. And in fact, you think about colonialism. Colonialists firmly believe that they're doing the right thing by taking the native peoples and teaching them to be Catholics or whatever. I think it's much the same way that this is a colonial effort by billionaires to reform the system around ideas that focus on business, industry, and efficiency. So the purpose of the comic is not to attack his motives and say he doesn't care about the schools. He doesn't care. And a lot of people will misread the comic, I think, that way. And that's fine. Can read it however they want. But I think I'm not trying to impugn his motives. What I think our comic is saying is that as a result of the amount of money he has, being one of the richest men in the world, he's able to have a disproportionate voice in the debate. So if you see who has the most voice in education reform, it's not me. Here I am in my apartment, right? I have my papers up here. I'm middle class. I'm on the front lines with the students, but I would be considered by Gates to be part of the status quo. And Gates and his demigods, like the CEO of Netflix and then proxy bloggers, are all these sort of corporate revolutionaries coming in to take down us middle-class teachers. And so it's this bizarro world by which the people that are on the front lines with the students like me, day in and day out, are somehow Goliath. And Gates and his ilk are like David that are trying to take down this enormous system. And in reality, I'm on the fringe, and my fellow educators, we're on the fringe. Like, our voices and our perceptions are not valued.
You know, Dan, you're a graphic journalist, and being a graphic journalist may evoke some sneers and jeers from journalists who write for newspapers or on TV or the radio. Graphic journalism seems to be a fairly new phenomenon, maybe not to the point where, I mean, there's always been sort of political cartoons in newspapers and people have illustrated these sort of things, but you're doing it in a different form. Are you trying to reach a different demographic, if you will, or maybe a younger demographic with this type of journalism?
That's almost a misconception that we're only trying to reach a younger audience, when in a sense we are trying to reach a broader audience, so to speak. And what Adam just explained was the project that we had in hand, and my task was to take that and distill it in a form and use graphic journalism as a platform for folks to really understand what the situation was. And that was the main challenge for me. Now, as far as comics journalism or graphics journalism, it's sort of kind of being up in the air. It's undefined. Has two advantages. I mean, right now we're sort of trailblazing our way through a form that, yeah, as you said, is not familiar to most folks. You know, but that's what the challenge was with this project with Adam, was taking something that even to me was something that I didn't completely understand, but trying to get it in a form that people would otherwise be able to ingest it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Adam, back to you. Some of these ideas or some of these changes that are being sought by Bill Gates and his ilk, you and Dan put it together in such a way that you have two things going on. One, you have I'm sorry, we're kind of critical of technology in a way, but we are using a lot of technology first to do this interview. But also, we are people who use technology every day, and we're used to certain interfaces. And the graphic novel, the graphic comic interface has a very simple surface to it. But then you dig down, you go down sort of certain rabbit holes with links, which you do embed within this comic. And so you find out more about what it's being said in each little panel. So talk a little bit about some of the changes that you have embedded, if you will, in this graphic comic that Bill Gates and his ilk, as I said, would like to see implemented in the education system.
We have a political cartoon that is completely factual. I mean, it took forever to write this. Dan can attest to this, and put it in this format. I've done extensive research on this, built on other people. But then, to distill that and put it in this format that incites is really challenging, but to not leave away the information. So we wanted to create a teachable moment where people would be incited and want to learn about it and inspire them, and then they'd immediately have an opportunity to learn about it via the links, and to see that the claims that are being made in the comic actually are substantiated. Now, of course, Bill Gates is not writing atop a steampunk-esque machine anywhere, but it distills the essence of getting to the kind of robber baron sort of turn of the 20th century feeling that we're trying to get at. I think the problem with his angle and his reforms is that they just want to ignore the market system and the dead zones, as Henry Giroux has claimed, that have been created as a result. And so again, they're not all bad ideas. Like one of Gates' ideas is that teachers need better feedback. I'm 100% behind that. But at the same time, he never talks about this broader context in which students live.
One of the things you brought up in your essay, the one that you linked to in the graphic comic, there's a sense that the type of reforms that are being sought are incredibly technocratic, meaning that, to go back to, say, Henry Giroux, that students aren't being educated, they are being trained to perform functions in society. And that seems to be what is happening. So you're an English professor. Things that you teach are sort of softer in terms of novels, short stories. If you teach about politics or sociology, these are all sort of looked as soft sciences. Do these things translate into the sort of rigid technocratic language of the kind of jobs that are going to be available on the other side of a college education?
If my students can't write and read thoughtfully, there's no job for them in the knowledge economy, right? So I take that my role as somebody that's helping them towards their career very seriously. But at the same time, we're not just preparing them to work in a job, that's part of it, or have a profession, we're preparing them to be citizens. And so I view my responsibility far broader than Gates and others would view it. It's not just a set of techniques I'm teaching them, it's encouraging them to have curiosity, inquiry, compassion, empathy, and being able to work with each other and argue in a civil manner. Not that we want everyone to agree, but to have civil debate. So I have a far broader conception of what it means to be an educator than the narrow technocratic vision where it's, I want my students just to be able to, plug in this, and then ergo they'll be able to get this job. And nobody can predict what jobs they're going to be in the future or what our democracy will be like. And so the best way forward is to help develop critically thinking, articulate, thoughtful citizens. And in doing that, they're best prepared for whatever comes down the pipeline.
Dan, back to graphic journalism for a moment. It seems that you and Adam, and we sort of highlighted this, at least touched a little bit about it, to use sort of a shop-worn hip-hop phrase. You guys are kind of flipping the script. What you're doing is instead of being a servant to technology, which it seems like in some especially I live in the Bay Area, so does Adam. Right. There's kind of a bro culture that people are here to create apps and to create, their $1 billion app and then retire at 30 or something like that. Yeah. But so they become almost servants to the technology, but rather what is going on with what you are doing, what you and Adam are doing, is that you're making technology serve critical and creative thought.
You are right on the button there. A challenge for us graphic journalists or journalists in general is to really, see the lay of the land as far as emerging technologies that are there, and how we can better leverage this stuff in order to tell better stories. Our approach to this piece and why we use the embedded thing link with it is that, the sequential imaging and the familiarity of storytelling is almost innate in everyone that sees a comic. They know how it functions. But when you layer it with this technology where they now have control as a reader in how they want the narrative to sort of, how they want to absorb the narrative, it becomes even more powerful because in a sense, they get a sense that they're actually part of that conversation that we're presenting to them. And they're able to make sense of it or see it in the way they want to see it. So the links that are available, not everybody clicks on a sequential link. They might say, okay, I'm hovering over this. This is an interesting article that Adam has brought up here. I'll look that over later after I read the rest, and then I'll click on that. But that's also, I think where graphic journalism and comics journalism has its promise right now is for, the creators to make something that's substantive in combining the technology and the hand-drawn and fusing it in a way that tells real stories and stories that people can relate to.
I was thinking about the reboot of the series Cosmos, where they even kind of used sort of graphic novelizations, if you will, of key components in history to tell their story. And at first I was a little put off by it, but then I realized, this is actually kind of effective because instead of having actors play these roles, it gave it a different feel. And I grew to it. I thought, well, this actually works for me. It has a more contemporary feel to it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, to speak to this real quickly, like, people read this comic and they might think we're Luddites, like we're against technology. Well, the nature of the medium we've chosen suggests we can't be. So I think what we're both arguing, it's not the technology, but how you use the technology. Do you use the technology to dumb people down or to provide them opportunities to be more human?
Back to the caveman who drew on the cave walls, we knew what that meant. It's somebody getting ready to tell a story and we're willing to listen and we're familiar with it. And I think that's the hook that readers see with, or at least the promise that they see in comics journalism, is to say, all right, I'm not so intimidated by this big subject that I really don't have a good grasp on just because it's comic. They think, oh God, okay, I can read this. This is comic. And then they find out that they're actually diving into a bigger issue and they're really getting into it. And that's the most exciting thing about, producing something like this.
Right. And we'll leave it there. Adam and Dan, I really want to thank you for being on Truthout Interviews.
Thank you
so much for having us, sir.
All right. Adam Bessie and Dan Carino are the creators of the comic that's on Truthout. It's entitled The Gates Foundation, Education Reform Hype Machine, and Bizarre Inequality Theory. Thanks for watching Truthout Interviews. I'm Ted Asregadoo. See you next time.